Hi guys, how's it going? This is Resident of Collinwood for YouTube, here to continue my read-along review for To Be Night and Beguile, Book 2, Chapter 4, Something Wicked is the chapter's title. Here we go. Dr. Ward checks on Georgina as Sebastian waits. A cold wind blew in over the Atlantic and into the trees that surrounded Welshport village, and over the green hills of the forest of Terramore. The mansion, with its Gothic turrets and stone gargoyles, that was named after the forest, sat sternly in the night with glowing windows of orange gas lamps. In a room over the east wing, Georgina Kent still lay in a state of sleep, unconscious from the night Sebastian Lord attacked her and bit her on the neck in a slight piercing that rendered her limp and asleep, but not dead. He lied in wait in her room, his body yearning for her blood, but he knew that was not the task at hand. He had to take her to Good Island, where the mother and daughter coven would use their powers to switch the bodies wanted the wanted Mary Good and Georgina. Coven is Mary Good and her mother Eliza Good. By the way, for those who haven't caught on to that. Um, this was the only way the witches would help Sebastian get Evie, his beloved wife, back from Wyncliffe. Georgina tossed and turned. Her heart and soul could feel, and Sebastian's dark eyes from beyond the draped in her room. He had no need for sleep. He had no need for rest. He wanted to take her this night. At her side was Dr. Jonathan Ward. uh, was Dr. Jonathan Ward. He watched over her, making sure his patient was stable, but he could not control her nightmares or her dreams. He took her temperature. He counted the seconds of her pulse. It raced. Then it would slow. Then it would race again. He would listen to her heart. The beating was loud, then soft, then loud. He would never he had never seen anything like it. This night, dark and cloudy as it was, felt incredibly strange to Dr. Ward, who began to feel uneasy at Terramore House. His patient's issues were a mystery. The bite on her neck, unrecognizable. Something in his gut told him this was not a normal situation. The place was not a normal place. Dr. Ward stood up and removed his perfectly circle-shaped glasses and a clean white handkerchief from inside his pocket to clean. She stepped aside from sleeping the sleeping Georgina and began to walk over to the large windows that looked out onto the dark night with the thick drapes framing the view and the night like a painting. Sebastian held his breath from behind the drapes. The doctor, still very dreary and worried, looked on. His face, aged beyond the true age, he shook his head in thought, unsure of what to do for Georgina, unsure that his seemingly haunted house of shadows could be the right place for a woman in need of true medical attention. No, I need to get her out of here, he whispered to himself, firm in his resolve that Georgina needed more than better medical attention. This was counter to Sebastian's plan. Upon hearing the doctor's strange thoughts spoken out loud, Sebastian knew he needed to act now. Satisfied with the cleaning of his spectacles, Dr. Ward turned back from the window and looked over at Georgina, who was still tossing and turning in her bed across the room, directly across from the doctor. He could see his own reflection staring back at him. Then slowly, in the reflection, the drapes began to peel back, as if something or someone was peeling them open. Dr. Ward tilted his head, confused, then turned back his direct right hand side to see Sebastian Sword's mouth gaping open with two sharp fangs lunging at the doctor. Sebastian landed on top of the doctor, who screamed and punched Sebastian in the back. They rolled around on the ground, knocking over an oil lamp that spilled the burning oil onto a rug, catching fire. The fire yelled slightly as the two women fought, the nearly the catching the nearby potted plants and drapes too. The flames grew and grew as the two men struggled on the ground. Then the vampire bit down on Dr. Ward's neck, drinking the blood. Ward screamed in agony, then passed out. Sebastian jumped up from the floor, his mouth dripping with the red liquid of Ward's blood. The fire was now minutes from growing out of control, but Sebastian grabbed a pillow as the smoke began to fill the room. He quickly put out the fire in all parts, now just watching as the smoldering embers of the drapes and carp fumed. Fire! A voice said from outside the room. It was one of the servants who smelled the smoke. Sebastian acted fast and leaped over to unconscious Georgina. He grabbed hold of her and flipped her over his shoulder and dashed over to a large window where that he kicked open like a skilled acrobat with strength, given to him by the curse of life after death, gave him climb down with his abductee and landed safely on the dark, wet grass of Jaremore House. He looked up at the open window of Georgina's room and saw lights flickering and smoke from the open window as servants came to check on the two people in the room, only to find Dr. Ward passed out on the burned floor, bleeding. Sebastian, with Georgina over his shoulder, rushed over into the darkness as far as off Wolf A wolf howled in the shadows of the dark trees that made up the seclusion of Terramore House. Rebecca Lord then entered the bedroom where a male servant was trying to wake Dr. Ward. She was out of breath and in a thick golden robe with slippers that matched. He, her long, thick, red curly hair that was turning white was braided and went the length of her back. Georgina, where is Georgina? Rebecca asked in a panic as the servant looked up at the empty bed. I, she, she wasn't here when I came in. Rebecca dashed over to the open window and looked out, her face frozen in fear and jumping back to the memory of finding Sebastian's signet ring in Georgina's hand when she was attacked. How is he? Rebecca asked of Dr. Ward, bleeding from his neck. The cuts are like punctures, the servant said. Rebecca knew the wound well. It was the same as Gaspar's. It was the same as Georgina's. Take him over. Well, take him to one of the other guest rooms. Go quickly. We must be. He's sure he survives. He needs to tell us what happened here, Rebecca ordered, as two more servants, a man and a woman, came in to help. Rebecca then turned back to look out the window as the smoke of the room fire began to clear. She knew this was Sebastian's doing, but was he doing it for, and how was he alive? This is if That is if this was even Sebastian at all. Rebecca had to know for sure. She had to see for herself if by some bizarre, unthinkable chance her grandson had somehow survived his horrible murder and was somehow doing this evil deed. The Lord family matriarch wrapped her soft nightcoat a little tighter around her shivering body and knew that what she had to do. She had to exhume Sebastian's coffin to see for sure if he was there for now. Feeling like she was a world away from her own time at Terramore House, Evie sat in the dark study at Wincliffe Sanitarium reading a book provided by Dr. Kim. She wasn't allowed many things there, and in fact, she was only allowed time in the library for an hour a week, but it was her favorite hour a week. As a girl in England, Evie would often escape her troubles by drowning herself in the stories of art and magical tales of princes and princesses from other times. And although the books at Wincliffe Library were catered carefully by Dr. Kim not to raise any kind of maniac behavior or fantasy and further distort what he saw as clouded and demented minds, they still helped Evie escape her current reality. At best they could, anyway. Or, sorry, as best they could. So, I could really give you a better story than anything you could find in there, a voice said, entering the room lit by the large fireplace. It was Evie's new friend, Alice Winterbourne, the mysterious and beguiling fellow patient at Wincliffe. Evie smirked. I'd love that. Do you have books hidden away in your room? Well, not really, just stories of my life, stories of places I've been and people I've met. I've lived many lives, Evie Jordan, Alice replied as she sat across from Evie. Evie closed her book and gave Alice a look of confusion that glimmered with a sparkle of interest. There was indeed something strange about Alice. Their interaction in the garden was proof enough that Alice Winterbourne was something special, something with a keen connection, that all things that made the world what it was, a magical sphere of beauty and mystery. Evie could tell Alice was the person who could unlock those mysteries. Tell me, how did you do that out there? How did you make that flower grow out of nothing? And the rain, how can someone do that? Evie asked, determined to understand Alice's truth. We're all part of the world. The elements are in us. It's just a matter of connecting to them and using them for the grace of good and the greed of evil. But that's not a story I'd get into with you. I feel like you know that already, Alice replied. Do you? How? I don't feel anything like I don't feel anything at all like I imagine you feel or connect the way you connect. I want us to get out of here and free myself. It's all my mind does constantly, Evie confessed. And perhaps that is why you cannot connect, to the world around you. Mother Earth is at your side at all times. You can free yourself. You just need to see it and believe it, Alice replied. Don't you want to be free of this place too? Evie asked. Alice smiled sweetly, and the idea that Evie would put two of them, in the same situation, but Alice's life was perhaps best if she was kept somewhere safe, even Windcliff. The world outside these walls is not a good place for me. I feel much more at ease here, meeting people like you, showing them their potential. From the moment I saw you, I knew I could open your mind to the world outside of this one, and in a way that helps me too, Alice said. I don't understand. What can you teach me? Evie asked as the fire in the earth crackled and burned a bright yellow light on the two women in the library. I came from a place, Evie, that is a world so wonderful and so grand you wouldn't believe your eyes. But that world is in its last days. There are factors that come along and take from my world and kill off what it needs to survive. I came here to this place in hoping of finding someone who could help my people. That was over 40 years ago, Alice explained, although she didn't seem too over the age of 25 herself. But how? Evie asked, confused. The dangers, they're somewhere. They're everywhere, Alice replied, confusing Evie further. Alice, I just need to understand. Do you mean where you come from, your people are in danger? Evie wondered. The truth I told you about my people will come in time. Of all the years I've been here, people have yet to believe me. They didn't come to listen to a female who's tried to save a world. Everyone has just scoffed at me, tossed me aside, or called me mad. But I see something in you that shows me all is not in humanity, not lost in humanity. You're kind, you believe me, Alice said with a sparkle in her eye. Evie wasn't sure what to believe. It was as if Alice was speaking in riddles, but one thing was for sure, Alice's mystic intrigued Evie. She found her interesting and beguiling. There was a deep sense of honesty about her, even if it was clouded by delusion. But at the same time, Evie knew exactly how she felt when People tossed her aside, too, and didn't believe her when she said that someone was trying to make her think she was crazy. I believe you, yes, Eva replied, grabbing Alice by the hand and squeezing. Right? And I'm thankful for that. You might be the answer to my people's prayers, Alice explained. With the few similarities in their story aside, Alice's situation seemed more dire, stranger, even more involved. Were these words coming from someone who truly needed her help, or were they just strange fantasies of a person who had no real grasp on reality itself? That was Alice's even referencing. Evie kept thinking, how could Evie help if no one in 40 years was able to? Evie decided to give Alice the benefit of doubt and pressed from her for more information. I'll do what I can to help, of course, if your people are suffering, as you say, but we would have to make sure we told the right people who could help. Alice smiled back. Just always remember, my people are your people. I knew you would say that you would help. I just knew it. All right, ladies, all right. That is enough cozy story time for the night. Let's get back to our rooms. It's Med's time, the burly nurse said when they opened the library door. Alice kept smiling and got up from her soft chair and squeezed past the nurse who didn't move an inch from her post at the door as she and Alice made eye contact as she passed back to her room. Evie took a deep sigh, disappointed she didn't get a full story from Alice's before the nurse interruption. She too got up from her chair and replaced her book on the shelf. She grabbed a lit oil lamp and began to make her way back to her room for the night when the nurse made a snickering sound with her lips and teeth. Don't listen to a word she says. She's been saying strange things like that since the day she came here, the nurse nodded. Oh, Evie replied. The nurse lifted an eyebrow and nodded with a chuckle. Just wait till she tells you where she's from. She tells she's from a people of a world that is in danger. Has anyone ever looked into that? Evie asked. The nurse chuckled again at Evie's concern. She could see how Alice was yet again drawing someone new into her web of grand storytelling. Honey, if everyone was to help Miss Alice find her home, to help her so-called people, we'd all be drowning under miles and miles of ocean water. She says she's a sea creature from a place below the ocean, hon. Some place from the depths of the Atlantic, lost in all that can see. Who knows where she got it? But as you can see now, she's here for a reason. Don't indulge her fantasies now, otherwise you might just become a victim, just like her last best friend. Evie's eyes squinted in confusion. What happened to her last best friend? Nurse smirked cryptically before answering. Alice drowned her, the nurse replied very non-casually. A chill ran up Evie's spine. She may have escaped Jacob's murderous plot, only to be placed in an environment where she can be in danger from people all around her. Get to bed, the nurse shouted from down the hall. Evie nodded and nervously dashed back to her room, checking over her shoulder every step of the way. After a difficult and rough night over wild ocean waves that tossed and turned his rowboat from Welshport Island to Good Island, Sebastian finally arrived to the slowly awakening Georgina. She moaned and groaned as the night sky began to change color From deep purple to the budding dawn of lavender and orange, Sebastian had to get to the cottage before the sunrise, or he'd be finished. He tied the rowboat to the dock and picked up Georgina, whose eyes began to blink open as Sebastian carried her over the rugged land of Good Island. "Where am I?" Georgina groaned. Then suddenly she understood. "Sebastian?" Georgina slapped her assailant in the face and rolled out of his arms to the ground, only face first into the dirt. Sebastian lunged at her, but even in her weakened state, she was able to turn back and kick Sebastian in the shin, causing him to fall backwards to the ground, hitting his head that left him unconscious. Georgina gasped and tried to get her up from the ground. I tried to get up. Yep. She couldn't believe that it was the dead heir of the Lord family on the ground in front of her. She looked around, unsure of where she was, but knew she had to get away from the creature Sebastian has turned into. From her place on the floor, she backed up and struggled to get up as her feet constantly snagged on her mud Kate's skirt. Then something grabbed her by her knitted hair and lifted her from the ground. Georgina screamed as she turned to see who was holding her by the hair. She saw Eliza Good's menacing face, angry that Georgina had thrown a wrench in her plans. "You've been a bad girl, Eliza," to Georgina, who was panicked and frozen in fear just as Mary came into view. "Mary," Georgina whispered and gasped, recognizing the woman who killed Sebastian. Mary did not reply, only poured out a small red pouch with the white dust into Eliza's free hand. Eliza sneered at Georgina and blew out the dust into Georgina's face, causing her to fall asleep. "Get Sebastian before the sun rises. Go," Eliza warned as Mary quickly obeyed and helped the waking Sebastian up from the ground. "Hurry," Eliza, noting the sunrise, and the group quickly headed to the cottage and began their switch of Mary and Georgina's body. Celeste and Charlotte. A single floating cloud dissolved into a mist, slowing in the distance. A new afternoon sun that brought with a fresh spring breeze over the green slopes and hills of Welshport. It was the day after Georgina's abduction, and somehow, someway, the village had already heard about Rebecca Lord's missing maid. While walking along Birch tree-lined avenue in the center of the village, Charlotte Lord and her new governess, Celeste Daventi, carefully cut through the littering crowds of people on the streets and stepped up to the Garmsey Cafe for a coffee and passion fruit juice. Even in the Garmsey owned by a Lord family, simper people stared at the young heiress and her new governess with shock in their expressions. The owner of the cafe brought them their drinks as young ladies of society would do, but properly folded their napkins over their laps and thanked him for his service. "I don't care what anyone says, the lords and their companies have helped many as Welshportian for generations. I won't throw you out," the cafe owner said in a whisper to Celeste and Charlotte. "Why would you?" Celeste asked, playing dumb, but she knew the news of Georgina had to have already trolled down from the Terramore forest, but she wanted to be certain. The cafe owner smiled, knowing her game, and removed a rolled-up newspaper ironically owned and published by the Lord family's publishing company. It placed it on a table with its headline facing up. Georgina bowed her head and read it. Lord Maid goes missing. The Welshport Globe. Lord Maid goes missing and second strange occurring at family home in 6 months. Well, Celeste said nervously, you can't believe everything you read. So she isn't missing. You know her family has deep ties to the community too. People are shocked. They're saying she was burned alive up there in the mansion. We all saw the smoke. The cafe owner said as Celeste folded the paper and handed it back to him. We didn't hurt her, Charlotte replied. Oh, miss, I wouldn't say you did. I wouldn't, he relayed, forgetting Charlotte was even there. He smiled at the young girl and took her out 3 wrapped chocolates and left them for her on the table, then bent down and leaned to Celeste. Careful up there, careful, he warned. Once the coast was clear, Sabrina, the spirit of Sebastian's murdered mother, still dwelling inside the young Charlotte, spoke. This must be more of Jacob's doing. He can, she paused, or, oh God, it couldn't be, Sabrina said in Charlotte's voice. What? What is it? Celeste said, knowing who she was talking to. I just had a terrible thought that somehow Sebastian might be involved. Celeste looked around to see people were still looking at them oddly suspicious, but when meeting Celeste's eyes, they'd look away. She hoped they didn't hear their conversation. In a whisper, the governess took the two connected Lord women to task. Charlotte or Sabrina or whomever you are, you'll have to help me understand all of this because at this point I feel I'm going mad. There is absolutely no way Sebastian could have been involved with Georgina's attack, or abduction, or the fire, or anything like that. You and I both know he's dead, and I'll remind you of Evie's fate when she even uttered the word Sebastian and alive in the same sentence. We have to be very careful from here on out if we want to stop Jacob on his warpath he's on. Sabrina then and there decided to keep her knowledge of Sebastian's return by a spell from Sabrina's sister Eliza, a secret from even Celeste. You're right. What I meant was I think there has something to do or connected to Sebastian's murder. We could start getting ourselves back on the mark, Sabrina said. How could this be connected to Sebastian's shooting? Celeste wondered. Anything connected to Jacob is connected to the death and destruction. I know for a fact that he's involved. He always is. My death, Sebastian's, and now maybe Georgina's, Sabrina said in Charlotte's voice. It was somewhat far-fetched, Celeste thought, but at the same time it wasn't. Celeste has always known how horrible Jacob was and cruel, and there was no reason to doubt Sabrina. She had nothing to lose. Her most precious belonging, her life and son were gone. Celeste knew it had to be true. All of it. Jacob was responsible, and the death and the lies. It was him, and this was the reason Sabrina needed help from Celeste. We have we have to have proof he's done all of that he's done. I can't help you. No, I won't help you if you have no proof. That is my bottom line. Charlotte to, needs to know whatever you put her through is for something. No matter how horrible he is, Jacob is still her father, Celeste said, sipping for coffee. Charlotte frowned, knowing her governess was right. Whatever Sabrina wanted to do to the man who murdered her, she wasn't sure what, if anything, she could do. I want I just want him to stop. I was he has hurt so many people. I just don't want him to do it anymore, Charlotte said, surprising her ghostly possession. There there must be something we can use against him. Letters, old telegrams, something, Charlotte wondered out loud. In his office there's many papers. I can look, Charlotte said. Then ghosts inside her spoke. If he finds you, you may be hurt. He may hurt you. It can't be you. It can't be Charlotte, Sabrina said. You can't be serious, Celeste replied, knowing what was coming. If you want proof, Celeste, it's going to have to be you. You'll have to find it, and that will be what we use to stop him. If we don't, he'll be he will continue to do whatever he Sabrina said before being hushed by Celeste as she noticed Philippe walking into the Gramercy Cafe. Sorry if I mispronounced it. Love, what are you doing here? Celeste said, standing up to greet him with a double kiss. I was on my way to see Christian when I saw you and Miss Lord here having an afternoon snack. Hello, Miss Lord, the handsome Philippe said to a blushing Charlotte. Why are you going to see Christian? Celeste asked. Philippe looked at her strangely. Philippe looked at her strangely as if he thought she was playing with him. How could she have not heard George, about Georgina, he wondered. It was the talk of the town in the newspaper, and she worked in the house the kidnapping happened. Surely she would have heard the servants nervously whisper about the abduction, he thought. Someone attacked Georgina a few nights ago and came back last night and kidnapped her, he said frankly, and he saw the folded up newspaper on the table. Of course. I wasn't sure of what that if it was that or Mary or Celeste, replied in a flustered tone. Are you okay? He asked, darting his eyes back and forth from Celeste to Charlotte, who sipped her passion fruit juice, hiding the fact she was possessed by her aunt's spirit. I'm fine. Fine, you can imagine it's been a crazy night. And the things at the mansion are upside down, Celeste replied nervously. Everything made her nervous now, and knowing Philippe was going near Terramore made her almost sick to her stomach. You don't seem fine. Did you see something someone or something last night? Philippe said, wondering, fully knowing that his friend Sebastian was the most likely the culprit. I didn't. No, Charlotte and I went to bed early and only woke up at the fire brigade as the fire brigade came up to the house, Celeste said cheerfully. Philippe smiled and seemed to believe her. He strangely felt happy no one saw whoever took Georgina. He knew it had to be Sebastian. He sensed it. He felt it in his own veins, in his heart. Sebastian and Philippe were like blood brothers, and now that his connection gave him insight into everything Sebastian did, feeling rushed by his plans, throw Christian off to Sebastian's scent. When the kidnapping, Felipe said his goodbyes. Well, I should leave you ladies to your luncheon and meet Christian to see what he has in evidence. You'll come home tonight, won't you? Philippe asked, missing his beautiful partner. I'll try, she replied. He smiled a half smile and pulled her in close for a deep romantic kiss. She felt tingles all over her body. She missed him too. Missed him, but her new job as Celeste's governess was indeed a monopoly on her time. Once she pulled away from their kiss, he held her by the shoulders and looked deep into her eyes. Please be careful, my love. Please. I don't know what is out there, and I don't know what is to come. But knowing you're at Terramore, and I can't be there to help you when you need makes me uneasy. Will you promise me this? You'll be safe and careful, Philippe asked of Celeste, secretly worried about Sebastian on the loose. I'll take care of her, Charlotte interjected with a bright grin. Philippe and Celeste both turned to the lovely Charlotte, who was backlit by the sun shooting through the cafe front window, casting her in a glowing like an angel. Her hair tied in a perfect blonde, beside a sky blue satin ribbon that matched the one tied around her waist. Of course you will, of course, Felipe said, leaping over to Charlotte and kissing her on the cheek. Love you, Celeste, mouthed to Philippe, who winked just before he left to meet Christian. It was a happy moment, swimming in a sea of deceit. Both Philippe and Celeste were keeping secrets from each other. Celeste was plotting to rid the world of the treacherous Jacob, and Philippe knew Sebastian was alive and well, and quite possibly haunting the halls of his family's former mansion. Both of these secret keepers knew the price they'd pay if either one were to fall at their new and dangerous job. They loved each other too much for that. The secrets continued to be kept for their love, for their safety. As Celeste watched Philippe rush off down the main Washport Avenue to meet with Christian, two women passed them on their way out and lifted their noses as if Celeste and Charlotte were two person persona non grata. Sabrina from inside Charlotte let out a sigh. We must act fast. The people of this town will have no more of us. I can feel it on the horizon, Sabrina said. Charlotte sighed. Sabrina was right. They had no time to lose. The proof of Jacob's evil needed to be found, and Celeste was about to put herself in the most dangerous lion's den of all, Jacob Lord's crosshairs. Alright, guys, that's the read along. I'm sort of curious what exactly Philippe's gonna do because he does know Sebastian's alive. Like there's only so many people who actually know Sebastian. Well, when I say alive, I mean undead. Um, let, I apologize. Let me stress the word alive for a second. He's a vampire, so he's undead. My version of alive now has gone off the rails. My apologies. So when I say he knows Sebastian's undead, he knows Sebastian's a vampire, and there's only certain people who know this fact. Okay, Mary Good, Eliza Good, Philippe, and now Georgina, obviously. The people who die don't count. They're dead. They knew, but they're dead. They're taken care of, as I'll say. Um, so there are three people who know Sebastian's undead, and Philippe's one of them. And knowing this, he wanted to tell his partner the truth, but now she's working at Tara Morehouse's Charlotte's new governess, and now he's worried to death for her and her safety. Remember, Philippe was afraid to answer his own goddamn door. That's how worried he is with this whole Sebastian business. you know, so you sort of wonder what exactly Philippe's going to do because he hasn't got a chance to tell Celeste. And my feeling is he wants her home to, well, obviously not to just keep her there, but to tell her. He doesn't want to like tell her as she's going back up the Terramore house because that would just be crazy. Well, not crazy, but it would put her mind at an uneasy feeling. At least that's my interpretation. That's my reader's sort of perspective. Again, when I give my opinion, it's my opinion. So walk away with your own sort of narrative here. Um, I will say too that to find out that Alice is you know now Alice does have some sort of power, but I'm guessing Alice is from Atlantis. That's my guess. That's where that's. I gotta believe that's my prediction there. That's what that's gonna. Um, I could be wrong. I could be wrong. I would have sure said I could be wrong. Um, yeah, I think uh, there are a lot of when you get into the characters, there are a lot of them are stuck between a rock and a hard place. Evie, who's in Wincliffe, who's gonna undergo electric shock here, um, and then you have Philippe, who sorry, Philip, who's who's you know the woman he loves is working at Terramore House, and she's in danger because well, here's Sebastian, he's undead now, and he knows it. He's also trying to steer Christian from this exact path of Sebastian, but it's like Philippe knows. Okay, Georgina's missing. This is Sebastian. It has Sebastian written all over it. He knows it. So how does he help Christian but steer him away from Sebastian at the same time? It's becoming harder and harder now, especially with now Georgina missing. And I was sort of wondering if Philippe's going to throw heat on Mary Good here. Just to throw heat. Just like I gotta keep my friend here away from the vampire. Like no, uh, uh, lie your ass off. That's what you need to do to your friend. Uh, but and then there's I'll say this too that with um Rebecca, she wants Sebastian's body dug up, and now it's gonna be like, oh shit, oh shit. Link is in the description box to Benight and Beguile. Very, very, very good. Really great characters. Love the depth. And again, the scenery is always nice. John, I've told him this, really puts you there. He puts you uh, at those places very, very well. Uh, Links in the description box, guys.